Hello, everyone, and thanks once again for joining us for Thursday's Alaska weather. Up first, hazardous weather graphic. There's still a winter storm warning out there for the eastern Alaska range on the north side there, on up across the upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country to including Eagle and areas just to the north there. And again, that's out for tonight until 6 a.m. Friday morning. And looking at storm total amounts to range from anywhere from, 6 to 10 inches. And then the yellow area, winter weather advisory for snow, Greater Fairbanks area, Yukon Flats for Yukon, Tanana, and the Alaska Range. That's out until 6 a.m. also, and that's for storm totals of around 4 to 7 inches. And the NANA picked up anywhere from 1 to 3 inches today for snowfall amounts in that area. Otherwise, everywhere else, advisory watching, warning free. So going on to satellite imagery, you can see low pressure there spinning over the Gulf of Alaska, moving eastward and approaching the southeast coast. And that band coming into the central southeast coast brought some pretty good snow at Sitka with that this afternoon. And but temperature's about 34 degrees, so it's a kind of a heavy wet snow, not really sticking too much, although they did have a period of heavy snow, and 34 degrees heavy snow could start to accumulate, but more convective on and off type precipitation as that system continues to move east and then track off to the southeast. Otherwise, areas of rain or snow fell over much of the remainder of the panhandle, nothing too terribly heavy. And clouds and snow diminished over the eastern interior from the Copper River Basin up into the area just south of the Yukon Flats there. Another system along the Arctic coast brought some light snow to that area. Central coast picking up about an inch, possibly some accumulations also over the eastern Arctic coast. And snow showers along the Alaska Range brought a couple inches snow to Sparivon today, anywhere from 2 to 3 inches in that area. Other locations seeing much lighter precipitation. And cold air coming in to Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, and continuing to pour in across Kodiak Island. Last observation, Kodiak had peak wind gusts 43 miles an hour, 30 degrees, and that's our low temperature for the day, 30 degrees. They're seeing it right now as that colder air comes in, and also some pretty gusty winds, channeled areas of the Kenai Peninsula and into Prince William Sound as well. And then you can see out to the west the next big cirrus shield with the next system there, and moisture just to the west, front pushing some rain into the Shimianatu area, and that other system pulling off to the southeast, really not bringing too much in the way of any precipitation. Pretty light amounts there for the central eastern Aleutians. High pressure building out over the eastern Bering Sea, and that low off the southeast coast with the rain and snow there. Juneau picked up about 0.2 of an inch of liquid water equivalent falling as rain and snow mixed there at Juneau. In the last 12 hours, Wrangell about 0.3 of an inch, so nothing really heavy. The precipitation there more kind of showery in nature and convective. Otherwise, winds gusted out of the north to 32 miles an hour at Valdez, actually northeast winds there. And Kodiak had 41 mile an hour peak wind gusts, and Seward had the 43 mile an hour wind gust out of the north. And of course, clear skies at just about all of those locations there on up into Cook Inlet. And Susitna Valley, pick up some clouds, maybe some light snow over towards Eureka, and areas of light snow over the Copper River Basin. Low pressure along the western Arctic coast. Again, areas of light snow there, mostly on the central and western Arctic coast. Amounts negligible to up to an inch in some locations there. And that trough extending from the low center brought areas of light snow, fog, flurries mostly to the northwest coast to down to about Shishmaref. And for tonight, we'll see the system is gone now off the map, drops rapidly off to the southeast there, the one that this afternoon is well south of Kodiak Island. It's out of the picture by tonight. Low pressure remains off the coast of the Panhandle. It's going to continue to rotate several surges of moisture in the form of rain or snow into the southeast coast and keep the flow mostly south or southeasterly there, so snowfall levels will be generally above sea level, but even at sea level you probably see mixed rain and snow. And in some of the heavier showers, that could pull the freezing level or snowfall level right down to sea level, in which you could see minor accumulations at that elevation. But the heavier stuff will be at the higher elevations, as it usually is. Light snow chances continue or flurries for the Copper River Basin. Very light snow showers lingering along and north of the Alaska Range as the whole moisture field begins to taper off in that area. And the next system out there to the west, bringing gale force winds and warm south gale force winds, warmer temperatures, and rain into the western Aleutians, spreading in toward Adak, possibly Adak late tonight. High pressure keeps it dry. Over the southeast Bering Sea, trough on the north side of that high, though, might bring some snow shower chances to St. Lawrence Island, the Yukon Delta coast, but dry over the northern interior, mostly clear Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, south central Alaska, with even colder temperatures tonight, and low pressure over the eastern Arctic coast. Chance of snow showers continue along all of the southeast, or all of the North Gulf coast for tonight and for tomorrow. That diminishes. Still maybe some few skiffs of flurries there for the western Arctic coast, but nothing significant. And winds on the light side over the interior. High pressure builds in. Temperatures chilly, definitely staying well below freezing. Some cases well below 20 degrees with gusty winds. Cook Inlet, Madanuska Valley, Kenai Peninsula, Resurrection Bay, Seward, for example. Whittier, gusty west winds. Passage Canal, same thing. Northeast for Valdez. And northwest winds continue pretty gusty, gust 40 miles an hour. Beginning to diminish in the afternoon for Kodiak Island. Clear with light winds for Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula, and still areas of snow or rain and snow for the Panhandle, but that low is starting to slide off to the southeast now. And then for Saturday, clears out with some lingering clouds, southern Panhandle, but increasing winds with that high over the Yukon as it retreats westward from the interior, and that'll make for gusty north winds for Lynn Canal, full gales, 40-knot winds for Lynn Canal with lighter winds down to the south. Big change out toward the west coast. And the western interior, actually, snow and blowing snow ahead of that front moving into the Yukon Delta, Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound, and eventually along the northwest coast there. And then freezing rain possible with the warmer temperatures, especially aloft first, eroding the cold air down to the surface. So mixed precipitation, St. Lawrence Island, the southwest coast, rain and snow developing for Bristol Bay. Snow starting out as some light snow for Kodiak Island, snow pushing into the Kuskokwim Valley, all the way eastward into southern Cook Inlet and the western Alaska Range, with rain and snow showers and much lighter winds back over the Alaska Peninsula, and a couple of troughs for rain and snow showers over the western Aleutian areas. And moving on to the lows for tonight over the Panhandle, anywhere from the upper 20s to lower to mid-30s, with lows near zero for the Copper River Basin and 5 below to 15 above for south central Alaska, warmest there near Homer and Seldovia. And Talkeetna 3 degrees, but Willow could see anywhere from 5 to 10 below zero tonight, right around zero for the Kenai Soldotna area. And the Kuskokwim Valley, right around zero. Single numbers for Bristol Bay for the lows, and mid-20s for Kodiak Island with gusty northwest winds. And then the highs for tomorrow, 8 degrees, a forecast high for Talkeetna, 10 for the Kenai Soldotna area, Sterling, and 15 there for Anchorage, Palmer, Eagle River, mid-20s down around Homer, 22 for Seward, 30 for Valdez, and 30 to 35 northern Panhandle, mid-30s to the south, near 30 for Kodiak, and in the teens for Bristol Bay. Lows on Saturday morning, 10 to 20 below in the Copper River Basin and 5 above to 10 below for the Susitna Valley, Kenai Peninsula areas, East Anchorage. Lower teens now, Seward and Homer. Lower 20s for Kodiak. Mid to upper teens in the northern Panhandle, otherwise in the 20s for the remainder of the southeast coast. Yakutat down to 13. Highs, teens and lower 20s there for the Panhandle. and staying cold over the interior, back above freezing for Kodiak Island. Up to the north, their temperatures didn't make it into the system, so no data there. So out to the west, Aleutians, lows tonight in the 30s, and much colder there for the southwest coast. Highs tomorrow in the upper 30s, lower 40s for the Alaska Peninsula, mid to upper 40s for the central Aleutians, followed by lows, again in the 20s for the southwest coast. Bristol Bay, of course, into the single numbers there. Upper 20s, lower 30s for the Alaska Peninsula, 35 to 40 for the Aleutian chain, lower 30s in the Pribilofs, followed by highs mostly in the 40s, colder along the southwest coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather time. IFR, Brooks Range North Slope, and most of the Arctic coast. Then some spotty areas of IFR from the Seward Peninsula eastward into the north central interior, and a narrow band of IFR from the Kuskokwim Delta and Bay Area right on up, it looks like, along the Kuskokwim Mountains and then eastward there on the north side of the Alaska Range, and then becoming more widespread as you get in toward the central Tanana Valley, Fairbanks area, and into the mountains to the north, and then all along the north side of the Alaska Range. VFR south of the mountains, though, south central Alaska, North Gulf Coast. And some IFR that's improving as you head west over the Panhandle. Big area VFR, Kodiak Island, across the Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, northern and southeast Bering Sea, and the eastern Aleutians becomes marginal for Adak and Atka. And the next frontal system bringing some IFR into the far western Aleutians. And for the afternoon on Friday, that area of IFR with that next storm moving eastward across into the Bering Sea, IFR spreads to the central Aleutians and Unamak Island. Marginal VFR is overspreading the Pribilofs and on Alaska Island, but VFR to the east there, Bristol Bay, Nunivak Island. Some IFR just south of St. Lawrence Island into the western interior Seward Peninsula, northward to about, say, the area between Kivalina and Point Hope. And narrow band of lower flying conditions along and north of the Alaska Range, pretty widespread over the central and upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country there, to well north of Eagle. They're almost up to the Old Crow area, marginal VFR anyway, and VFR for the North Gulf Coast. And Panhandle gradually improving conditions, see the VFR in the increase, IFR in the decrease, and that continues Saturday morning. VFR for the Panhandle, southern Alaska, areas of IFR in the central interior, especially to the west. North Slope, Arctic coast, mostly VFR, and then the frontal system there and IFR make landfall along the southwest coast in the morning, and then improving back behind to the west and southwest. And for the afternoon, that area pushes in across Bristol Bay, the IFR that is. Southwest Kodiak Island, marginal VFR up to Fognak Island, Kamishak Bay. Good VFR over the central and eastern interior of the state, as well as in North Slope and Arctic coast, Panhandle, Gulf of Alaska, all VFR. And also VFR from Atka Island westward to Shimianatu. Anatuvik, mostly marginal tomorrow. Adigan, mostly IFR. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR flying conditions, especially from the late morning through the afternoon hours. Rainy, looking good, either entrance tomorrow, VFR. Windy, slow improvement, IFR becoming marginal in the afternoon. Isabel, IFR trending toward marginal VFR. And for Mentasta, look for occasional marginal VFR throughout the entire day, but Tanita will be solid VFR from start to finish on Friday. Same thing for Portage. Good VFR on both entrances and through the pass. Chilkoot and White, IFR becoming VFR, so a general improvement in conditions there throughout the day. Definitely VFR probably through the entire afternoon, possibly IFR to start, could be marginal. And from there, going to the freezing levels, at the surface, Kodiak Island, off the North Gulf Coast, down along the west or south, central and south coast of the Panhandle, and again there between St. Paul and St. Matthew Island, 2,000 feet just along and south of the central Aleutians. Otherwise, the warmer air aloft being held to the south with the jet stream also to the south. As far as icing goes, we've got some considerable moderate rime icing coming up along in advance of that frontal boundary, pushing past Atka in the afternoon up to just west-southwest of the Perbolofs, and increasing icing threats there for the eastern Aleutians. Otherwise, an elevated threat of some isolated icing there of the light variety, Norton Sound up to the northwest interior, Noatak Valley and the coast, and also looking at some icing there for the southern panhandle. Jet stream showing southwest flow 150 knots into the central Aleutians, northwest flow at about 100 to 120 knots there across the southwest interior, especially Kodiak Island, 9,000 feet, 40 to 55 knot northwest winds right through the western interior and the North Gulf Coast, westerly 80 knots out over the Aleutians, and the strongest winds in the Aleutians, but northwest 5 knots there for the Aleutian range, resulting in quite a bit of moderate chop and turbulence.
Greetings, Meteor Minders. Trace here. Meteor showers are like nature's fireworks, and next week's Geminids is one of the strongest of the year, producing hundreds of meteors every night. So let's hit the darkness for the show. Find a dark, comfy spot and look north after 9 p.m. If you draw an imaginary arrow through the Big Dipper, it'll point to Castor and Pollux, the heads of the Gemini twins. That's where to look. They're named the Geminids for a reason. Once your eyes adjust, you should start seeing meteors. The moon rises about 10:30, and it might make viewing a bit tougher, but fortunately the Geminids usually put on a good show for several nights, both before and after the peak. A meteor shower occurs whenever our Earth rides directly into a stream of space debris left behind by a comet, though in this case, unusually, it's caused by an asteroid rock comet named Phaeton 3200. Keep looking up.
Been to the beach and noticed litter like plastic bottles or foam takeout containers on the sand? Or maybe you've been to a river or bay where there's a bag or a car tire stuck in the mud on the shore, or a bunch of deflated balloons that say happy birthday floating in the water? All of that junk in the water or on the shoreline is considered marine debris. It's anything solid and man-made in the ocean or Great Lakes that is not supposed to be there. And anything people use every day can become marine debris if they don't dispose of it properly. And I mean anything. The most common items we find when we do shoreline cleanups are plastics. But we also find rubber, cloth, glass, metal, and paper litter. Sometimes the debris is so tiny, like a plastic microbead from your face wash, that you can barely see it in the water. Marine debris is more than just trash in the ocean. Sometimes fishers lose their gear like fishing traps, nets, or fishing line, and it continues to drift through the water, catching animals for a long time. We call that derelict fishing gear, and it's marine debris. Have you ever seen an old boat left behind on a shoreline? Abandoned and derelict vessels are also marine debris. So let's review. Anything we use every day can become marine debris if we don't dispose of it properly or if it goes into the water by accident. Marine debris can be very small or can be very big, and anything in between. But most importantly, marine debris is one of the biggest pollution problems facing the world's oceans and waterways today.
How does marine debris impact the ocean, animals, and me? Would you want to swim in a beach littered with trash? Of course not. And the animals who live in the ocean don't either. The difference is, they don't have a choice. Marine species often get tangled in debris, from fishing nets to six-pack rings. If they get caught, they could get injured or even die. And even if they don't get entangled, many animals mistake plastic debris for food and eat it. This fills their stomach with junk they can't digest. Debris can also damage important habitats, like coral reefs, by breaking or smothering them. Corals serve as the base of the marine ecosystem, and impacts here can be felt all the way to you and me. Plus, plastics have harmful chemicals in them. Fish eat plastic, we eat fish. The question is, can those chemicals harm us? Marine debris also hurts the economy. It costs a lot of money to clean up, and people don't want to go to dirty beaches. Boats and ships could run into large pieces of debris too, or get their propellers tangled. We need the ocean and everything in it, and the ocean needs us to keep it free of debris. About marine debris.
A lot of the trash that's in our ocean is plastic.
And that marine debris is hurting our environment, economy, and health.
The problem will only get worse
unless we change the way we consume and dispose of products. There are solutions,
and together we can prevent litter from ending up in the ocean. Some people might say,
well, I'm just one person, so I can't make a difference.
But that's just not true.
If each person who creates trash, and that's just about everyone, took action, it would add up to a whole lot of change.
So what can we do?
Well, the ultimate solution is prevention. And we need to keep that as our highest priority.
We can reduce, reuse, and recycle to keep debris out of the ocean in the first place.
You can bring your own shopping bag, drink out of a reusable bottle, and participate in things like a shoreline cleanup.
Join a group cleaning up the beach, or grab some friends and clean up your street. It's easy.
Be more conscious of how many disposable plastic items you're using. And if you do,
where are you putting it? In the trash can? Whoops. Or in the recycling bin?
So here's the challenge. The next time you finish using a throwaway item, a bag, a bottle, or utensil, answer the question, where is this going? Because ultimately, when you throw stuff away, there really is no away. It has to go somewhere.
So keep asking yourself this important question.
How will you keep your trash from becoming marine debris?
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Marine forecast-wise, we've got west winds 20 knots for the south coast. Small craft advisories on the north coast. North-northeast winds there at 30 knots with 10-foot seas. Gale warnings for the northern inner channels. North winds 35 knots. Small craft advisories for Stevens Passage, north at 25, and southeast 20 for Clarence Strait. First day of the weekend, small craft advisories on the south coast, northwest to northeast winds at 25 knots, and east-northeast winds 30 to 35 knots on the north coast. Full gales for Lynn Canal, north 40 knots, seas 8 feet, north winds 30 knots for Stevens Passage, and northwest 20 for Clarence Strait. Prince William Sound, north winds 30 knots with higher gusts, and the North Gulf Coast, gale warnings, 35-knot northerlies around Middleton Island with 50-knot gusts out of the Copper River Delta, western North Gulf Coast north at 45, gale warnings for the Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay, northwest winds 40 to 45 knots, and north to northwest winds in Cook Inlet 20 to 30 knots. For Saturday, Cook Inlet, northeast winds 15 to 20 knots with 2 to 5 foot seas. Northeast of 15 for Prince William Sound with 3 foot seas, and east-northeast for the North Gulf Coast at 20 knots. Barren Islands, southeast winds 25 knots, east at 25 for Kamishak Bay. Kodiak Island, northwest winds 40 knots Friday with gusts of 60 knots. Lighter winds for the Alaska Peninsula, north to northwest 20 to 25 knots, and 30-knot northwest winds for Bristol Bay. And for Saturday, south winds 30 knots for Kodiak Island. Gale warnings for the Alaska Peninsula. Southwest winds 35 to 40 knots. Bristol Bay, southeast winds at 30 knots. And for the eastern Aleutians, gale warnings, east to southeast winds 30 to 45 knots with seas running 9 to 14 feet. Gale warnings for the central Aleutians, southeast winds 40 to 45 knots for Adak and Atka. And from Amchitka to Shemya, winds will be east to south at 40 to 45 knots. Then on Saturday, for the western Aleutians, northwest winds 30 knots. Small craft advisories for Adak and Atka, northwest 25 to 30 knots. And for the eastern Aleutians, west-northwest winds 25 to 35 knots with 11 to 14-foot seas. For the Pribilofs on Friday, gale warning, south winds 35 knots, southeast winds 30 knots for St. Matthew Island. For the southwest coast, west-southwest at 20, St. Lawrence Island, southwest 25, seas 8 feet. And for Norton Sound, south winds at 15 knots. Big increase in the winds for Norton Sound on Saturday. Gale warning, southeast 35 knots. And full gales for St. Lawrence Island, southeast of 45 knots. Same thing, but different direction for the Yukon Delta coast, southwest 45. Storm warnings for the Kuskokwim Delta coast, south of Nunivak Island, south winds at 50 knots. Pribilofs, west winds 30 knots. Gale warnings for St. Matthew Island, west at 35 knots. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast for Friday, west winds 15 to 20 knots, and for the central and west coast, southwest winds 15 to 20 knots. Chukchi Sea, west to south winds 15 to 20 knots. And for Saturday, for the Chukchi Sea, east to southeast winds 30 to 35 knots, southeast at 15 for the western Arctic coast, central coast south at 15, and the east side winds will be southeast at 15 knots. And for tonight, look for areas of snow, light snow, and snow showers for all of the Arctic coast there, with the heaviest amounts kind of moving off to the east with that trough, and then another enhanced band coming onto the west coast late tonight. Could see anywhere from a trace to maybe another inch up there. Otherwise, winter storm warning continues for the upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country for 6 to 10 inch storm total snowfall until 6 a.m. on Friday. Otherwise, windy conditions, clear, cold temperatures, south central Alaska, Bristol Bay, and rain and snow for the Panhandle for Friday. Next storm pushes in with gale force winds, rain, and warmer temperatures to the eastern Aleutians and the Pribilofs. High pressure over the interior, mostly clear and calm conditions over the state. Still unsettled for the Panhandle, and some snow showers continue with that weak trough there from Norton Sound, Nulato Hills, northwest along the northwest coast. And then for Saturday, big change. High pressure pulls off into Canada, and south winds, mild temperatures, snow, freezing rain, and rain begin to invade the western part of the state with blowing snow north of the system. Otherwise, cold and dry east.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.